1114. Rob Elliott, could you start us off, sir, on the topic of our foreign relations? That includes the relations with China that Ron alluded to earlier, emerging markets, and or the impact of the competitive global markets with Ukraine and Russia in the current situation, please.
Sure, Vanessa. That's a lot of responsibility you just laid out there on. But I think one of the key things that Ron mentioned earlier is big dependence on China for a lot of back and forth. A lot of ag exports certainly go there. What if in their relationship with Russia they decide, maybe we go try Taiwan? Where do we go there? I think that's a real wild card that I don't think really anybody wants to face. So that's one. The other one with Ukraine and Russia, I heard a consultants say a couple weeks ago that the impacts or implications for this are probably broader ranging than what any of us really can realize, and probably longer lasting in their effect in the market. From an ag standpoint, I believe Ukraine's the number one sunflower producer. They're like number 6 in corn. They're kind of the breadbasket of Europe. What if they don't get a crop planted? What if those ports in the Black Sea don't have the ability to export out of there? So a lot of big changes to our export market, and exports with emerging world economies have become a really big deal to our markets and profitability. But what I would say, when we get into these ultra high commodity prices, goofy things begin to happen. Demand kind of can take some unprecedented turns in where we go, and people figure out at very, very high prices of commodities to figure out a different direction. And as a result, this has a lot of dynamics at play. So
it does. And South Africa making some comments in regard to NATO, that there's some potential blame with NATO. That's been an emerging market, at least in parts of Africa, that we have seen. Jake Armstrong, your thoughts. We had a chance to talk about this last month on your segment on the radio show. Lots happened since that day.
A lot. And as we said that day, I'm really relying on people who have a few more gray hairs than myself to guide us through this, because I've never seen a war economy. I've never seen a war market. I mean, this is all just new to my generation. When you're talking inflation coming on, volatilities in these markets, I mean, it's enough to keep a guy up at night. I want to echo what Rob said about Ukraine's crop. Whatever gets planted, that's great. That's awesome. I really worry about their infrastructure and their ports, getting that out and actually making a difference in the ag economy. Can we capture that? Is that going to fight our ethanol? That's a rolling ball that's in the air right now, and it could be very beneficial for agriculture, and it can really hurt us in other senses if we are stealing corn away from ethanol plants and fuel prices what they are. As we've talked about in the previous hour, that ethanol is a great source to help lessen our fuel burdens, and I guess we would all appreciate not paying as much at the pump. This is a very interesting time to be in agriculture, and personally, I do think we're going to have strong prices for a while, just because of all this uncertainty, because of the technologies we're talking in soybeans coming forward. With hand in hand, I think Brendan's right. I think we're going to have expensive inputs as well. Personally, as an ag retailer as well, I'm terrified to know what this fall looks like. Trying to get product in, trying to get anhydrous, trying to get enough. I think we have a real challenge in the next 6 months to get as much stuff on our shores as we can, because this whole world could flip very quickly, especially as we've alluded to with China and Taiwan. That's something no one wants to face.
Brendan Marshall, that keeps Jake up at night, but it keeps you up at night as well, making sure you've got product for your customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real balancing act right now, and I'm going to use this as an example. Roundup, which a lot of farmers use Roundup. It's been allocated this year. My company, we're only going to get a certain percentage of what we sell, and my company covers 7 counties. if everything works out, because we switch products around on growers, and I've got 2 customers in the room that have made some changes in order to make sure that they can secure the amount of product that they need. We've turned into the automobile industry as an ag retailer. We're on-time delivery right now. We got an allotment in February. You get one in March, like with Roundup. We'll get another one in April. We'll get another one in May, June, and actually we're going to get one in July. And we're not even count the July into the products that we're going to sell this year. So if we run into a problem where everybody hits the field at one time, we talk about a rolling blackout. We could have a rolling blackout with products. Now, if transportation keeps up, which is always a catch-22, we're going to be fine. And I think we've prepared ourselves, my company, and I know I've talked to a lot of my competitors and other FSs, that everybody's geared up for it because it got hammered into us a year ago, starting last July. I mean, that's when the shortages happened, when things weren't coming out of China. I sat in a meeting a couple weeks ago with a representative from a chemical company, and they don't see this getting better in 23, possibly carrying to 24. But things you don't think about, packaging materials, like we get a lot of stuff in bulk, or we get it in 250-gallon totes. And those totes are plastic with steel cages around them. We can't get totes.
Right.
And so that becomes a problem with getting other products on the market. There's a shortage right now of atrazine. I'm 55 years old. Atrazine was developed long before I was born. And if you don't have it in your facility, you're probably not going to get it. I mean, it's been around forever. And that's just little hiccups that we see in the market that we got to get worked out with everything else. And I use the thing rolling blackout, and that's what could happen through the whole ag retail industry. And it could happen in fertilizer very easily.
Interesting. All right. And Dan Swanson, as our state representative, also a veteran, thank you for your service. Take us through what you're seeing, what you think. You've seen conflict before. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. Last week, we invited the Illinois Army National Guard to come in and give us kind of a briefing on Ukraine. And it was mentioned earlier, we don't understand the impact this is going to have. Ukraine right now is entering into their spring planting seasons. It's their time of year just as it is ours. And I read a blog called Ag Talk Plus, and there was a Ukraine farmer on there who's now off the air, but he was talking about how he was going to struggle with his country. He farms about 2,400 acres. He took his wife and child to Poland, came home, and 3 of his hired men said, "We're going to go pick up a rifle and go to combat." So he said, "Not only am I struggling with my help, but I'm struggling with even getting the products I need to put in my crops." And it really hits home when we're trying to get our crops ready here, and there's no jets flying over bombing us, there's nobody shooting at us, and we're fighting all these other prices, as Brendan pointed out, and Jake, the hardships we're going through, and it's going to be a tough spring. But here those people that in Ukraine, those farmers are certainly going through their struggles too, and we only talked about the agriculture side of the equation. As Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, sort of, they also have a lot of raw materials that we rely on too, and so we've got all that coming together. It's just going to be a massive program here, issue. But we've got to keep our eye on China and Taiwan, and I think we're all doing that, but I don't think we can take our eye off of the rocket man in North Korea either. He's been lighting a lot of fuses here lately, and where's a lot of our pork products go? To South Korea. They've became a larger importer of our pork. Is that going to disrupt some of our exports into South Korea if Rocket Man starts lighting more fuses? And then, oh, by the way, Iran shot some missiles at our embassy in Iraq, in the city of Erbil, which I've been in. Erbil and up in that part of Kurdistan is beautiful country. Wheat fields as big as what you'd see out west. So a lot of things is going to be impacting our markets as we try and export to other countries. And then as we start importing products that we need to put on our farm, it's going to be major impactors there. So I think the global impacts right now are larger than what we've ever seen as our farming industry. World War II, of course, back in the 40s, those were all problems that we didn't have to work through, but now we're facing our own global problems, and interest rates went up. So it's a lot of, this war is bigger than what some of us may think. Some of us may realize. We see empty spaces on our shelves at our grocery stores, and it's bothersome what we see, and logistics and all the issues that go into this. But yeah, so there's more than just the war in Ukraine. There's a lot of other global impactors right now in our markets.
Ron Moore, you guys discussed this. You alluded to it earlier at the 2022 Commodity Classic in New Orleans. I hope you had some really good food for me, especially like shrimp and seafood.
Yeah, we did. I ate seafood every night.
Good, good.
We don't get that here in Roseville or Monmouth.
So tell us what you learned. What was the discussion at the Commodity Classic in regard to this topic?
Well, it's been said here earlier. Most of what we talked about down there was said here earlier. But one thing I guess two things that I perceive, I may be totally wrong, but I don't know that you're going to expect a lot of exports out of Ukraine right now for the next, I would say for the next year. I think even if the war ends this week, they're going to get enough wheat and sunflowers built to supply their own country. I think that's probably most high on their priority list, is to provide food for their countrymen and their consumers. I don't think they're probably going to be too worried about making sure they can get into the export market. We have high prices right now. It's extremely sad that tragedies in Ukraine is what is causing us to have these high prices. We've got supply chain issues. Brendan talked about being just-in-time delivery of things like the auto industry, but I foresee this changing the mindset of the manufacturing industry, because I think they're not going to be satisfied with just-in-time delivery of widgets or whatever they produce, because once we get through all of this logistics, I think they're going to have more in a warehouse, more in inventory, so they don't get subject to these kind of drastic supply chain issues in the future. I think that's my prediction. And I think because they're going to maintain those inventories instead of West Central FS, our costs are going to continue to stay high, like Jake was talking, for the foreseeable future. I don't take advantage of these high prices now, because I think in 23, 24, 25, our margins are going to come back down to where they were 3-4 years ago in agriculture. So guys with the gray hair have seen this feast and famine before, and we're terrible reason why we're having these good prices right now, but they're not going to last forever.